بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. So today inshallah we'll continue our series of lectures that we held on the life of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, and we talked about Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba's upbringing, and we also talked about how his stages of learning, and we also talked about the circumstances in which he grew up with his father and with Lajjar, and all of the events that happened in between that, and we also talked about all of the events that led to him founding the Muridiyya. We also talked about the trips that he took in Senegal and also in Mauritania, and all of those sequences of events are what led to him founding the Muridiyya. But today inshallah we will talk a little bit about how Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba founded the Muridiyya and the influences he had that led him to found that movement. So Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, in his upbringing, he had a lot of political influences, and we went in detail about how his father was a close friend and an advisor to Lajjar, and how also he was surrounded by scholars when he was learning in Salum, and he was surrounded also by people who were involved in politics and stuff like that. So he saw a lot of political stuff that led to him having a different way of looking at life and a different vision. So that was one of his influences. And when he was a student of knowledge and learning, he also had many influences from certain scholars, especially Sufi scholars. And the most influence he had was from Imam al-Ghazali. Imam al-Ghazali was one of the Sufi scholars that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba really revered, and he had a lot. Imam al-Ghazali had a lot of influence on Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, and even the type of mysticism that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba adopted is the mysticism that Imam al-Ghazali taught, because in Tasawwuf there are many, in Sufi orders and Sufi sects, there are different types of Sufis or different types of sects. There are some Sufis who are extreme Sufis, meaning they have extreme belief systems, and sometimes they adopt certain practices that are not approved by Islamic law. And there are certain Sufis that are not very practicing, who tend to take the acts of worship and or the acts that are ordered by Sharia. They tend to not take it. They tend to take it to light. Like, for example, praying and fasting and all of the acts that they consider like zahir, the outward acts of worship. There are certain Sufis that tend to not give that much importance and focus more on the inward aspect of the human being, like the aspect of the heart or belief or things like that. But the type of mysticism that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba adopted is called sometimes by certain people mild asceticism, meaning moderate and minimalist Sufism, meaning moderate Sufism, meaning the person adopts the Sufi lifestyle, which is composed of asceticism and all of that, but also adapts also and really hold firm into Sharia and the outward aspect of Islam. So the moderate Sufism is holding firm to the Quran and the Sunnah and the outward sciences like fiqh and the outward practices like praying, fasting, and all of that, while also focusing on the inward aspect of the human being, like the aspects of the heart, the aspects of spirituality, the aspects of asceticism, and etc. That's the type of Sufism that the Cheikh adopted. So all of those had an influence on Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba and his philosophy and his way of looking at life and his way of teaching. So all of that is very, very important to understand if one really wants to understand what Muridiyya is about. So when Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba's father passed away, he traveled around Senegal, and also he went to Mauritania, and he gathered a lot of books and a lot of texts, and he met with different scholars and stuff like that. So when he came back, he was still in Mbacke Kadior for some time, and then he traveled to Jolof. So when around that time, he was still a teacher. He was still teaching Islam, and he was still teaching the traditional sciences. And the Murid sources mention that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba one day called all his disciples, and he told them that whoever came here to study just Islam, the outward sciences, then let him find another teacher. But whoever wants to follow us in the path that we want to undertake, meaning the path of spirituality, then let him obey our command and leave our prohibitions. So a lot of the Muslim, the Murid researchers, they say that was the birth of Muridiyya. That's when the Muridiyya started. But to really understand that aspect, we have to distinguish between two things, which is Muridiyya as a as an organization or as a community in Muridiya as a tariqa. In Muridiya as a tariqa. Because sometimes when we say that Muridiya as a tariqa started at that time, then that can be very, very problematic, because there are also certain events that happen after that that is not in conformity with, how Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba would have founded a tariqa in that stage of his life. And even some Murid researchers like Sheikh Mustafa Job Koki, he talks about that in his book Al-Umda. And that section he called it Al-Muridiyya wa Ishkaliyatu Al-Bidaya. The Murid and how certain things are problematic when it comes to like the emergence of the Muridiyya, because there are different accounts to how the Muridiyya started. So we have to differentiate between Muridiyya as a tariqa and Muridiyya as, just an organization. Because at this stage of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's life, he was still a teacher. So he could have not founded a whole tariqa at this stage. So at this point, he was just a teacher, and he was calling people to something, to an innovation, a good innovation, because he saw around him growing up the state of the Muslim community, and how people were learning and how people were treating the Quran, and how education, the state of education in the Wolof community. So he saw many things that were wrong when it came to the Muslim society at that time. So he had different ways and different methodology when it comes to education. So he introduced those new aspects, and that aspect that he introduced was, like I said earlier, spirituality, because before his time, people, they know about Islamic knowledge, they knew about the outward sciences, like fiqh, like learning the Quran and memorizing the Quran, tafsir, fiqh, Arabic grammar, and all of that. They knew about that, but what was lacking from them is spiritual knowledge and spiritual exercise, and manners and stuff like that. So he had to include that part of Islamic teaching into his program. So that's one of the things that he introduced at that stage of his life. So some people say that that's the birth of Muridiyya, but here Muridiyya, what is meant by that is just the community or an organization, because like I will explain later, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba did not reach the status of someone who would initiate or create a Sufi order. So just like I said earlier, Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba lived in an environment in which many aspects of Islamic teachings were neglected, and just like some people who lived at his time, like Sheikh Abdullah Inyas and Sheikh El-Hajj Malik Sy, rahmahumullah, they all saw also that aspect of in the Senegalese community, the Muslim community, because of the influence of the French colonization. and also the Ceddo and their tradition. The Senegal, the Muslim community had, different ideologies and different practices. So all of these people, they introduced an a way of teaching Islam that would target people's soul, the heart, and also redefine who they are and give them better character. So one of the principles that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba introduced in his way and his education, in his way was education. The first principle that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba really focused on was education. Education. Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba viewed education as the centrality of a guided, virtuous life. In many of his teachings, he always encouraged people to study, to learn knowledge, and also practice it. In many of his writings, he says that whoever forbids you from learning knowledge, then that person is the representative of Shaitan. In many of his writings, he states some things like that because he was living at a time when there was a lot of ignorance and a lot of people did not value education that much. So one of the things that he really focused on was education, that people learn Islam, and not only the outward sciences, which is memorizing the Quran, learning tafsir, Arabic grammar, and stuff like that, fiqh, but also the inward sciences, which is knowing the diseases of the heart and how to purify one's soul and how to have good character. So those two aspects of learning was the two central points that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba really focused on when he introduced that methodology. So in Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba's system, the system that he introduced, there were three types of education. There was ta'lim, which is teaching the outward sciences, which is memorizing the Quran, learning tafsir, hadith, etc. And there was also tarbiyah, which is educating somebody, targeting the soul, the heart, and the character. And there's also tarqiyah, which is ascension. But that type of education is only reserved to certain people. So Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, in his system, he introduced three types of teachers, which is Sheikh Ta'lim, Sheikh Tarbiyah, and Sheikh Tarqiyah. The Sheikh Ta'lim is the teacher that teaches outward sciences. The Sheikh that teaches Quran, Tafsir, Fiqh, Hadith, and Arabic grammar, and all of that. So those type of teachers were the primary educators of society in Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba's system, because those are the people that should learn the Islamic doctrine when it comes to theology, jurisprudence, etc., and then teach it to people so they can establish a learned Islamic community. And then you have Sheikh Tarbiyah, and Tarbiyah is education but targeting the soul and the heart and the character. So the Sheikh Tarbiyah is the teacher that serves as an educator, but not to teach knowledge, but really to develop somebody's character and to make sure that people have like good spiritual state and good heart. Those are the sheikhs that would look at a person and identify the character flaws that they have or the diseases of the heart that they have, and then try to cleanse that as much as they can. And then you have the Sheikh Tarqiya, which is the teacher that that teaches but without the intention of teaching. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Those are the type of teachers that don't sit and teach, but all of the students who want to learn from them, they come to them and they live with them and they emulate their actions, and they look from they look at how they live and the practices that they do, and they imitate them and those people were very, very special, because those students who learn from the Sheikh Tarqiya, those are students who are meant to be leaders of the community, and you have all of that in Sheikh Bamba's system of education. The teachers who specialize in ta'lim, teaching people Islamic knowledge, and the teachers who specialize in educating the people. And you also have the teachers who specialize in ascension, meaning giving people higher rank, spiritual rank, and also social rank. And Sheikh Bamba taught people he was an embodiment of all three of them, because Sheikh Bamba taught Islamic knowledge, he also educated people, and he also raised people and educated them in a way that they will become leaders. And Sheikh Bamba, all of his sons who grew up and reached an older age, all of them became leaders. All of them became great leaders because he educated them as a Sheikh Tarqiya. He elevated them and gave them status. So that's one aspect of the system that Sheikh Bamba introduced, which is education, the centrality of education. And then Sheikh Bamba also introduced many other aspects that consist as doctrines and practices in the Murid community. And one of them is love, khidmah, and hadiyah. And in a very famous poem, Sheikh Bamba has a verse in there in which he summarized those three aspects, in which he said, "Tuba li abdin muridin sadiqin lahumu li khidmatin aw bi hubbin aw hadiyati." He says that in that line, he says that the servant who is a murid and he is truthful about his irada, those people have succeeded. And that happened through love, through khidmah, which is service, or love, or giving hadiyah, or gift. So those three aspects, love, khidmah, and hadiyah, hubb, khidmah, and hadiyah, are three aspects of the muridiyah that is very, very important in the murid community. And love is expressed in the murid doctrine as through submission, or as they said in Wolof Jebel, meaning if one of the ways that one disciple would express their love towards the sheikh or the one whom they have given, they pledged allegiance to, is through Jabalu. And Jabalu or submission means that one plead allegiance to a sheikh in, acting according to their recommendation and avoiding all their interdictions in all the matters that pertain to this life and the hereafter. That's how they understood submission or jabulu, and that's a way to express one's love towards the sheikh. And also khidma is one way to express love, although khidma also is one principle or practice in the murid community. And khidma can be in different ways. Doing a service to a sheikh can be in different ways, whether it is through working for him in the fields or building houses for them, or just writing Quran for them. Any type of service that you do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a sheikh is considered khidmah. And hadiyah, giving gifts, whether it's monetary or it is a material. Giving gift to a sheikh is also one of the practices in the murid community. Now, all of these three doctrines, Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, when he was talking about these three, he meant in specifically for those who are seeking a spiritual path. Now, but these three, as the murid community really expanded and developed, it became things that are global. That wasn't no longer specific to people who are seeking spiritual enlightenment, but for the whole community. And in the murid community, one aspect that make the Muridiyah, that organization, later on become a tariqah, because I said earlier that when Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba started his calling people to spirituality, and when he stood in front of his students and he said, whoever was here to learn outward knowledges, then let him go and seek another teacher, but whoever wants to go with us in the path of spirituality, then let him stay with us. When he was saying that, a lot of people, they said that that's the birth of Muridiyah, but Muridiyah here as an organization, but not as a tariqah. And the reason for that is that Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, he have stated many times, and Muhammad Bashir mentions it in his his book that he wrote in the biography of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, that the Sheikh told him that at that time, at that stage of his life, he was like a madman who was just going around and seeking barakah from different people that he thought that he would benefit from. And he took a lot of wird at that time. And he visited a lot of people, and he was still seeking a path, and he was still seeking somebody to guide him. So it wouldn't make sense that he initiate a Sufi tariqah at that time of his life. That's one argument. The second one is that he didn't have a wird. Now, in Sufi ideologies, when a person reach a certain level of spiritual enlightenment, they can have the ability or the privilege to see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, in Sufi doctrines, one can see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam physically, not in a dream, but physically the Prophet ﷺ coming to them and speaking to them and giving them a word, meaning a set of like phrases that they say and repeat and do at a certain time. Now, you don't have to go into the whole debate that many scholars they debate about that, whether it's possible or not or whatever. But I'm just giving you the information about the Sufi doctrine. Now, many of the tariqah, that's the word is the element that defines a tariqah in Sufi tradition. Many of the tariqah that exist, they didn't exist just because the sheikh was sitting there and teaching, but it existed because they had a wird, and through that wird, all of their followers would take that wird and then have a connection with that sheikh. So that's what the element that characterize a tariqah. So when the sheikh did his first call, he didn't have a wird. He had a wird later on, according to the one source, in 1904, after he came back from exile, when he was exiled to Mauritania. The first year in which he was exiled in Mauritania, that's when he received the wird. So he received a wird later on in his life. He didn't receive a wird at that stage. So to say that that's the beginning of Muridiyya as a tariqah, that's very, very problematic. So that's why many of the researchers in the Murid tradition, they say that the Muridiyya was just a community or an organization for that period of time. And then when Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba was exiled, to Gabon, that's when he reached that level of being a saint, a Sufi saint. And when he was exiled the second time to Mauritania, that's when he received a wird. So that's when Muridiyya became a real tariqah, when the Cheikh received a wird. But before that, it was a community that the Cheikh initiated and had its guidelines. So just like I said, the wird is what characterizes a tariqah. And for one to be initiated in a tariqah, one has to either take the wird or plead allegiance to a sheikh, meaning one has to go to a sheikh who had the wird, or go at the time of the sheikh, they will go to the sheikh, to Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba. But after his time, people who took the wird from Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, they have to go to those people to take the wird. That's how they initiate themselves into a tariqah. Or if they cannot take the wird, they plead allegiance to a sheikh who belongs to that tariqah, and then they initiate themselves in that tariqah. So that's one of the ways that people can initiate themselves in a tariqah. So that's one of the things that we should understand about the founding of the Muridiyya, because there are a lot of information in the sources, whether it's the Murid sources or the oral tradition. There are a lot of conflicting information about the founding of the Muridiyya. So just like I explained earlier, to really understand it better, we have to distinguish between the Muridiyya as a community and the Muridiyya as a tariqah. So the first stages of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba's life was just he was forming the Muridiya as a community or an organization. And then when he received the wird, or when he was exiled and he received that rank of a Sufi saint, that's when the Muridiya then become a tariqa. So yeah, I think it's time for Maghrib. So. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So before the Maghrib prayer, I was talking about how the Cheikh founded the Muridiya and how the first stages of the Muridiya, was considered as just an organization and not an actual tariqa. And that started when Cheikh Bamba stood in front of his students and told them that whoever was here to learn outward knowledges, then let him find for himself somebody else that could teach him, and let him go back to his people. And whoever want to come with us and walk with us towards the path of spirituality, then let him act according to our command. And when he said that, some people stayed, but some people left. And Muhammad Lamijov Dagana said that a lot of people who was there on that day, they left. A lot of them, they left. Only a handful of people stayed. And that's when a lot of some of the people, the first people who came and embraced his call and answered to his call and were willing to go and accompany Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba in what he wanted to initiate. And among them was Adam Agay, Sering Adam Agay. He's one of the first people to do bay'ah or jayante with Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba. And among them also was Sering Masamba Diop and also other people. And during that period of time, Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba also wrote a lot of books, because, like I said earlier, one of the greatest principle of his system, or the community that he founded, or the organization that he initiated, one of its greatest principle is education. So he wrote a lot of books, and most of them are in theology, aqidah and fiqh. That's one of aqidah, fiqh, and tasawwuf. And he wrote many books with that trilogy, aqidah, tasawwuf, and fiqh. Many of the books, like Tazawwud al-Sighar and Tazawwud al-Shubban, all of them have those three parts, those three components. So Muhammad Lamijab Dagana mentions that when the Sheikh called his disciples to the path of spirituality, he said that that most likely came by the permission of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he says that one of Shaykh Muhammad Lamijab Dagana says that one of his companions that he trusts told him that the Sheikh said that the Prophet ﷺ himself told him that Rabbi ashabaka bil himmati wa rabbihim bil dars. Educate your disciples with himma. Himma means ambition, and don't just educate them with just learning the outward sciences. And during that time, Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba explained to them and wrote many qasaid, many poems in which he explained what his call is and what he wants to teach them and initiate them into. So he wrote many poems in which he explains what being a murid is. And the word murid, Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba did not coin that word. That word existed since the time of the first Sufis. That's a word that they use, and the word murid comes from the word irada. Irada means to aim, to want, to yearn for. So they would use that word to refer to the person who yearns for spiritual enlightenment, or who yearns for wusul, meaning to attain the presence of God. So that's what the word murid is. And Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba did not create that word, or he wasn't the first one to use that word, and he did not intend to call his disciples murid, but that was just a term that was part of his lexicon. He was using that word many times. So his disciples, they took that word and identified themselves with that word. Many times when he refers to his disciples, he doesn't say, "Oh, you the murid." Sometimes he say, "Oh, the people who are my disciple," or he used different words except murid. When Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba says murid in all of his writings, he doesn't refer to only his disciples, but he refers to anyone who is seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. Whether you belong to a tariqah or you don't belong to a tariqah, anybody who has irada, anybody who has true devotion and aim to seek spiritual enlightenment, Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba called those people murid. But the word murid later on, his disciples took it and identified themselves with that word. So anybody can be a murid. Anybody, literally anybody can be a murid. You don't have to belong to the murid community, or you don't have to belong to follow Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba's teachings to be a murid. And Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba defined murid. He said that حد الإرادة بقول السعادة ترك المريد ما عليه العادة ثم رجوعه إلى المعتاد قبل وصوله كالارتداد. He says that the definition of irada, which is the word from which the word murid comes from. He says irada, according to the saying of the previous leaders, pious leaders, irada is the murid leaving anything that is customary, like sleeping well, eating to be full, and doing all the things that are customary, sleeping well, drinking well, drinking good stuff, and all of that. All the things that are customary, the person who is a murid, who wants to attain spiritual enlightenment, should leave all of that. And he says that returning to those customary things before attaining spiritual enlightenment is like apostasy. It's like apostasy in Islam, meaning somebody believing in Islam and then apostatizing. So, and he also says, إِذِ الْمُرِيدُ لَا يُرِيدُ أَبَدًا غَيْرَ رِضَى الرَّحْمَنِ حَيْثُ قَصَدَ, that the murid should not seek anything except the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anywhere he goes. He should not seek anything before anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says that صفات صادق المريد باختصار أربعة نظمتها خوف اختراع. And he gives the description or the criteria of a true murid, of a true disciple who is seeking spiritual enlightenment. He says that The criteria of a true murid are four. الصدق في محبة الشيخ أبد. The first one is being true in the love of the Sheikh, meaning loving the Sheikh or the teacher whom somebody is submitted to and learning and benefiting from them. Having true love for that Sheikh is one of the criteria of a true murid. ثم امتثال أمره حيث ورد, and also acting according to his command, acting according to the command of the Sheikh. Always acting according to the command of the Sheikh is also a criteria of a true murid. وترك الاعتراض مطلقا ولو بباطل عليه فيما قد رواه. And leaving or avoiding disobeying or turning away from his command, or denying anything that the Sheikh might tell you, whether it is even if it was inwardly, meaning the Sheikh might tell you to do something, but outwardly you might do it, but inwardly you're not happy about it, or you're having doubts or something like that. That leaving that also is part of the true criteria of a murid. ومعه سلب الاختيار لحسن ظنه بلا إنكار, and leaving self, meaning doing choice, leaving your choice, meaning you don't have no choice for your own self. You leave your choice and you leave it to the Sheikh to choose for you, and that comes from having husnul dhan, a good assumption about the Sheikh without any type of denying. And he said, فَكُلُّ مَنْ جَمَعَ هَذِهِ الصِّفَاتِ مِنَ الْمُرِيدِينَ فَيُدْرِكُ الثِّقَاتِ. He says that whoever gathers all these criterion from the disciples, those people will reach the thiqat, the great, elevated and trustworthy people. So those are the four criteria of a true murid. Anybody have any questions about that? Yeah, I don't want to go in the detail because it's it's another topic. So